thank you for joining me on the very first SpouseLink Livestream for military spouses who are thinking about military retirement, experiencing military retirement, or just on the other side of military retirement and maybe not quite totally sure exactly what they're doing. Maybe don't have it all figured out. Please, let's start by just telling me where you're joining us from. We're very excited. This is our very first of these SpouseLink live streams. We're hoping to have a whole bunch of them helping retired military spouses or military spouses nearing that way. Just figure things out a little bit better and a little bit easier. And the reason behind this is because first, let me introduce myself. I'm Anna Larson. By trade, I'm a copywriter and marketing strategist. I've done that for the last almost 30 years, which I feel like really ages me, but that's all right. So almost the last 30 years, I've been doing that same thing. I worked for a Fortune 500 company for about more than half of those. And then just recently, when we knew retirement was coming, I started my own small business. And I currently do mostly copywriting and digital marketing. I'm also a homeschool mom. And 6 months ago, my spouse retired from active duty status with the United States Army. And that process kind of took me by surprise. I mean, we've been planning this for years. Now, granted, we did retire through the COVID era. You know, I think it's like its own little time frame at this point. But we retired through the COVID era, which means essentially that some of those normal services that may have been available to other spouses were not available to me. And some of the services available to other service members were not necessarily available to my spouse. And so that made our retirement process a much bigger struggle than what we had expected. So that struggle led me to AAFMAA, AFMA, and SpouseLink, where I am excited to be able to focus some of my time and energy to helping other military spouses that are nearing this point get through retirement with better resources, more information, and a community of support. So today's topic that we came up with, that we wanted to talk about today, is losing your identity through this retirement process. And I have an amazing guest, an expert in the retirement process. And I'm going to bring up her bio and tell you a little bit about her, and then I'm going to bring her into the live stream. So let's go ahead and move this over. All right, so Annie S. Brock is the CEO and president of the Leader Transition Institute. She is a former U.S. Army paratrooper and medical evacuation helicopter pilot. She earned a Department of Army Commander's Award for Public Service and a Joint Chiefs of Staff Public Service Award. She's owned several small businesses. One included being a Mary Kay sales director, where she earned the free automobile, which is pretty darn awesome. Annie is an international speaker and coach, has a Master's of Professional Studies in Public Leadership from George Washington University, and is a certified Lean Six Sigma Black Belt. Last but not least, Annie is a military spouse, and she is based in the Washington, D.C. area. She's been homeschooling, something I can relate to. She's had her two daughters as they've moved across the United States and Europe with military service. So with that, let me bring Annie in. Hi, Annie. Welcome.
Hi, Anna. Hi, Anna. Thank you for having me today.
We're so excited to have you here and talk just a little bit about this whole idea of losing your identity when retirement occurs. And I'm just going to start this off really quick by saying it's been kind of an interesting week, because even as Annie and I have kind of been going back and forth talking about this behind the scenes and planning out this live stream, we've had differing opinions about different things, different experiences that both of us have been bringing in to kind of clarify, like, what does this mean exactly, losing your identity? And her experience is different than my experience. And then just in some of our LinkedIn posts that have been going out through SpouseLink, we've heard from other military spouses whose experiences are yet even more different. Some having a struggle, some are feeling super comfortable and don't think that there's a loss of identity at all. And yet others are like, I can relate 100%. I have no idea what I'm doing. I feel totally out of place. And so that's kind of what we're hoping to do today, right? Is like just kind of discuss those different things. So you have such a rich history of professional and personal experience. And so I have some questions that I just wanted to talk to you about. The first one being like, you hear all the time about service members that are feeling a little lost and uncertain about this major change when they retire out of the military. And there are a lot of programs geared towards these service members, helping them work towards something that is ultimately going to be an amazing post-retirement experience, right? But we rarely talk about the military spouse and maybe the sense of loss or the feelings that they're having during that same exact process, because so much of the attention is focused on the actual retiring service member. So being a military spouse is really an identifying characteristic for so many of us that have been in the military world for as long as we have when retirement happens. So I guess my first question or comment that I hope we can discuss is just, can we just talk about is this a real thing? Can you validate that loss of identity, and maybe even share some of what you've seen as the president of a company whose purpose is to help people through this transition process?
Well, the first thing that I would say about it, Anna, because I see that somebody put in the chat that they haven't given their identity away. And that is one of the things that I noticed in my time as a military spouse. And that is that military spouses are all different. And they have invested varying amounts of themselves into their service member's career. And for some families, the spouse is fully invested and most everything revolves around that career, and she or he takes care of the children and manages everything else. And then I have seen other families where the spouse just did their own thing, and the service member, their military career was really for the family very much like a civilian job. They went to work, they did their remotes, but the family moved forward, and the spouse, the civilian spouse, did their own thing. And so when we talk about in military spouses and generalities, I think it's important just to recognize that as many different ones of us as there are, everybody's doing it a little bit differently, like homeschooling. No two homeschool families do it the same way.
Yeah, that is absolutely true.
So that's my first feeling about it. And what I will say is that once a military spouse, if your service member retires, you are always a military spouse. You're just a military spouse with different privileges. Because you still carry that ID card, you still have access to most military services and a lot of benefits, but you don't have access to everything.
Yeah. And I think that one of the ideas behind this then is that as people are going through this, I will say not people, but military spouses, as they're going through this transition, what you're saying, the ones who have spent a lot of their time and energy in supporting their service member, maybe volunteering within military organizations, I don't know, spending a lot of time with their FRG or, doing something along those lines, and even may still have a profession, may still even work outside the home, but still a lot of their personal identity is really focused on the things that they're doing within the military community, not just outside the military community. That when this transition happens, then it becomes a really important thing to find value and something you can be proud of, value and activities to fill those spaces that are now gone.
Entirely. I will tell you, my mother-in-law used to ask me, what am I going to do next? I didn't recognize what was going to happen until I was in the middle of it. And she hated, because she was a military spouse and had been through it. And so it's very important that to understand that not everybody is going through this, but everybody goes through something, because there is a change. And it's important for spouses of service members to understand what their service member is going to go through.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that? when you say it's important for the spouses, because this is one of those reasons why I feel like we do have that loss of identity. And just to kind of share my own personal experience, right? We spent a year, a little over a year and a half almost, 100% focused on getting my spouse retired. The paperwork he had to do, the process he had to go through, the different PowerPoints that he was having to watch, the offices he had to go and getting his CF stuff put together and turned back in, all of those things that happen when that retirement process happened. And I was so focused on making sure he got his things done that I hadn't stopped to say, how is this going to affect me? How is this going to affect my children? What services are no longer going to be available to me? Like, we hadn't even considered that portion of it until literally the day his retirement happened. And I had this huge crisis of identity when I said, can we even go to the library anymore? Which is kind of a ridiculous thing, right? Because there's 5 public libraries within, 10 miles of my home here at Fort Hood, Texas. But I was so focused on, can I go to the post library? And as a retired spouse, was I allowed to do that anymore? That it put me into a puddle on that day, where I just, all of a sudden I realized I haven't stopped to consider the impact this retirement process is having on me.
Well, I think what happened to you was a very normal and natural thing, because what happens to our service members' brains when they actually come on active duty is that they get reprogrammed. Their subconscious gets reprogrammed from having a civilian mindset to having a military mindset. And it's a really scientific process that the military uses to do this. And it continues over the whole time period of their military career. We as spouses don't go through that same programming that the service members do, but by living in the midst of a military community, particularly if you spend a lot of time living on the military installation and using military services and being part of that, involved in the military family, that same process happens to us. And so when we get to the end of our service members' career, our brains, our subconscious minds have become just as much in the military mindset as our service members. Mm-hmm. The challenge with this is that you can't flip a switch. It doesn't work that way. Our minds change very slowly. We as humans, 86% of us are very resistant to change. That's just by nature of our personalities. And happily for me, I'm not one of those. I can flip a switch and change it and go with the flow. But 86% of people are not like me. And so all of a sudden, having to think about doing things differently creates a disconnect. And that creates anxiety. And a lot of people that it really manifests in physical symptoms and can be show-stopping. So what happened to you is entirely normal and not unexpected, I'm sorry to say.
I'm glad it's entirely normal. I felt, I will say that personally, I felt just ridiculous, right? I mean, I feel like I'm a person who has it pretty together. And logically, it made no sense. What the emotions I was feeling and the strength of the emotions I was feeling did not make logical sense to me. And so thank you for validating that process I had to go through at that moment. Clearly, I was able to get over it fairly quickly and figured it out with a simple phone call or two, and got my answers that I needed. But but I feel like, my experience with the on-post library, other military spouses are having it with other things. Maybe it's the commissary, maybe it's the summer program their kids have always attended. Maybe it's even getting on post, and this situation with retired ID cards versus active duty, some of those kinds of things. So
right. The one thing I will say also is that what affects it also is what happens to you physically when your service member retires or leaves active duty. Because if you stay in the same community, then you have to change what you're doing. Uh, in some place that you've already lived. Maybe you don't have access to everything anymore. But for us, we moved from Bowling Air Force Base up to a civilian community by Aberdeen Proving Ground. And so we had to start everything from fresh. We weren't staying in the same routine. And so I think the adjustment is a little bit harder for people who are living off base, off the installation, and they remain in that same community because some things really do need to change in how they do things.
Yeah, and that would be my situation. I mean, we live in still in Fort Hood, Texas, and it's one of the largest retirement communities that is in the world. But honestly, I can't tell you five other retired spouses that I know personally. They're all still active duty. It's like they kind of hid or they don't identify as military spouses anymore. And I think that was part of the struggle that I went through personally was where are the retired spouses? Like, where do I fit in? I'm not active duty anymore, so I don't fit in on this side, but I'm also not a super seasoned spouse like some of these older, more seasoned women that I've met, or and men actually both, but that I have met that have been able to, find their way. So where are the people like me that in the last year or two have gone through this transition? And I think what I've heard and what people have said to me is that this loss of identity makes them uncertain of how to qualify themselves anymore, even. Yes, they are still a military spouse, but where is their value as a military spouse now? Like, where are they able to contribute to the world now in that sense?
And that is exactly why I created Changing Focus. And I know we're going to talk about that later,
Yeah.
but that's you've rolled into something that's really important for spouses and really for our service members too. And that is that they have to find value in themselves as human beings.
Yes.
Other military spouses, you have to value yourself as a human being and not see yourself just as somebody who fills a role. And that's important for our service members too, because they very often see themselves as a rank, a service, a job, and but they bring a huge amount of value as human beings, and it's really important to recognize that and to have that ingrained as you go on. Now, the problem is that that's not really entirely useful to the military to have service members doing that, but it's something that spouses need to work on, and they need to grow personally and professionally continually throughout their lives.
I love that, Annie. You know what? Let's just change focus and go. Well, you like how I did that. Let's move into that topic of changing focus, which is the flagship program of your Leader Transition Institute. And just to kind of like start it off, can you tell us a little bit about it? And I'm going to pull up your website while you're talking about it, and we're going to show people what it is and how they can access it.
Okay, good, great. So, Changing Focus is a free program designed for people who are in the 24-month window on either side of leaving active duty. But we welcome veterans from any era with any kind of discharge, and we welcome military spouses, surviving spouses when they're ready to go on to something like this. And what we provide, we started out when we launched 3 years ago, we started with in-person programs, but of course we went into the virtual arena with everybody else in March of 2020. And so we provide a 4-day virtual program that is hands-on. It's interactive. We start on a Thursday evening and go through Friday at noon. And the reason why the program is tailored that way is so that if you are employed on what I would consider a normal, not that there is a normal, but a normal Monday through Friday workday, that you would only have to take Friday off from work. And so we go from 7 to 10 on Thursday night, all day on Friday, all day on Saturday, and Sunday morning. And we start with the neuroscience of change so that people can understand how their mind functions, why change is such a challenge for us, and give them a basis for moving forward. I've found that when people begin to understand the challenges of change, that they can do better with it. So then on Friday, we spend all day talking about purpose, helping people be able to define and articulate their purpose statement. And we have an optional session in the evening. I'm an expert on LinkedIn, and so I teach them advanced networking techniques on LinkedIn and in-person techniques as well on Friday evening. And then Saturday morning, we spend a couple of hours painting, and I'm going to open our October painting session up to people who are not in the program but would like to participate, and we'll put some information out about that. We go on to talk about communications, because everybody who participates does a growth, what we call a growth and communications assessment. They learn how to recognize people's communication cues in what they say, in how they say it, and in their behavior, so that they can communicate with them better. And this makes a difference both, or not both, but at home, at work, in those all important job interviews where they have to recognize a person's personality style so quickly in the person that's interviewing them. We talk about the dollars and cents for transition, and they do an assessment to learn about their money habits and their money attitudes. And then we do individual resumes and LinkedIn profile reviews in the evening. And on Sunday morning, we come back with a 3-hour workshop on intentional living with a purposeful life. Along the way, we play with Lego. We do a lot of talking, a lot of interaction. So that's what we do. We send them everybody who signs up, we send a box of supplies. There's a $35 deposit that after they participate, we send their money back to them. Because it is just a deposit. Some people have been kind enough to donate their money to us and said, no, don't send it back. I love what I got for you. Please just keep the $35, it just really warms my heart. And so that's what we do. Our October session is next weekend. And so you can see up on the screen there, we have sessions scheduled in November, and then in January and February already for next year. So
yeah. I
am the most amazing team. I don't do it by myself. We have a most amazing virtual team of facilitators, and they are a combination of military retirees and veterans, and so I love them.
Well, I will tell you that I have heard nothing but like glowing positive reviews about changing focus. And in fact, I have one of your former graduates that I'm going to bring on. First of all, I want everyone to make note of this. November, January, and February, there's 3 sessions open right now. Remember, this is a free workshop. And you said it's within 2 years of retirement, right? Either before or after that you're looking for.
Yep, that's what it's designed for.
Okay, and it's open to service members and spouses. Do you recommend that service members and spouses take it at the same time, like in the same class together?
That's it's certainly an option. We've had several couples come through like that, but it doesn't always work out with the family schedule. So sometimes we've had a service member 1 month and their spouse the next. And the other thing I will say was we've actually had some people who've been off active duty for 20 and 25 years come through the program who needed to reset their transition, and they found it valuable too. So.
Okay, so it's designed for the 2-year time frame, but not necessarily limited to the 2-year time frame.
Yes, ma'am.
Important distinction for anyone that's listening right now. Thank you, Annie. Okay, so I'm going to bring on Heidi Barker. Let me stop the screen share and bring on Heidi. Hi, Heidi. How are you?
Hello. Hopefully you can hear me.
We can hear you. So Heidi is let me just start with this. Heidi and I met on LinkedIn. Maybe 6 months ago. It was right before my spouse was getting ready to retire. And we connected because she said, oh, we're just like 2 months behind you. We're getting ready to retire too. And they were living in Texas. So, that many mutual things, we had to become friends at that point. So we did. And so when Heidi and I connected, I was so impressed with her energy and their organization, and her spouse has created this amazing Trello board for retirement, which I'm not going to share it today, but it is coming soon for anybody that's listening and anyone nearing retirement. This Trello board is like your dream Trello board, where it just outlines everything that you need to get done. Anyhow, so they were so organized, and I felt like I was floundering around like a crazy lady during this time frame. So Heidi was like this guiding light for me. She was like, I just watched what she was doing and be like Heidi, and through this retirement process. So Heidi is an instructional designer, and she has a background in education and training, and she's also a 21-year military spouse. So thank you for joining us today, Heidi. Tell me a little bit about first, like, how did you feel in terms of, did you feel a loss of identity when your spouse retired? How would you describe that process for yourself?
I would say with him being active duty for 21 years, we got married when we were 21 years old. So I've been a military spouse as long as I have not been a military spouse. So it was definitely a big change in how I identified because of immediate changes, you know, the healthcare coverage, figuring out what you're going to do now, going to get that retiree ID, getting that new picture, realizing that there's some programs that no longer cover you as a spouse of a veteran. You're no longer an active duty spouse. And it's almost like you don't matter anymore to the organization that you changed your way of living for 21 years. My career definitely changed because of the military. Meanwhile, the soldiers going through their own change, and it can be a very stressful time for everyone, even if you didn't necessarily identify as a military spouse.
Yeah, absolutely. I really feel like you went through it with so much more grace than I did. I really feel like that was the situation, but I think what you're saying is really true. And I think a lot of military spouses feel that. Like you said, you've been a military spouse as long as you haven't been a military spouse, which is amazing when you stop to think about it. So, you took the Changing Focus from We to Me course from Annie, correct?
Yes, last
Okay.
month.
Yeah. Last month. So she's just a very recent graduate, even. So tell us a little bit about how it helped you process through that how it helped you get through the retirement process better, or how it helped you refocus, or what the benefits, I guess, you found from taking the course.
I would definitely say I wish I had done it much sooner. My husband was smarter and he took it last year at this time. So he was away ahead of the game from me. I really didn't realize it was for me to participate in as well. I think he said it in passing, but you know how your active duty soldiers like, oh, there's this or there's that, and you're like, okay, whatever. But if you go to the retirement type classes that they offer service members when they get out of the military, it's of course really oriented for them. It's not really oriented for the spouse. But I did attend that with my husband, and that was shortly after the Changing Focus that he went to. And, you know, I was there. I was invited to attend, but I was never really acknowledged, maybe one time in the 2 or 3 days. Whereas Changing Focus is a totally different story. When you're there, you feel like you matter. Everyone in the cohort matters, and you get to know your other fellow classmates, I guess you would say. Annie likes to call us alumni after you go through the course. And it really helps you to figure out what direction you want to take in. I never felt like I was invisible. You know, I was a part of this amazing group of people that were going through a same situation. You and I joked the other day, Anna, that no one's transition is typical, but we do all have this common bond that we were involved in the military for however many years, and now we're moving on. So moving from we to me really helps you to see yourself again, and Annie helps you to develop your goals, your vision, and your purpose statement so you can take that next step.
I love that. And that's really what it's all about, right? That's really that missing piece when we talk about losing your identity as a military spouse. It's refining your purpose and your goal and what direction to go now that your life isn't directed or all consumed by what the military is dictating to your active duty spouse. So, love that. So, Heidi, I know Heidi is currently up in Wisconsin. So, she's having like internet craziness right now. But thank you for joining us. Before you go, what would be like your one piece of advice you would give somebody who's getting ready to go through the retirement process right now as a
Definitely take
military?
advantage of Changing Focus, moving from we to me. I wish I had done it sooner. I think it would have made the transition a lot easier as my husband was going through it.
Okay, so there you have it. Recently retired spouse, alumni of the Changing Focus, and that's her number one piece of advice for any of you military spouses listening right now. And you're in this process. Those 3 classes that are coming up that Annie and I just talked about and went through, I'll be sure and pop that link in the comments after the live stream to make sure everyone just has a direct link to go and find that Changing Focus course and can register. I'm super excited. I am registering. Annie, you'll see me in a class coming soon. And my spouse for that matter. I feel like we both need this. So, all right. Thank you, Heidi. I'm going to pull you out and let you get on with your day. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So, Annie, we talked a little bit already about the class and the course and kind of the whole identity thing. Like, if you were to give 3 main takeaways to our listeners here on this live stream today, like, what is it that you would leave them with? Like, maybe 3 things.
So the first thing that I would say, Anna, is that if you are a military spouse and you aren't currently doing anything for your personal growth, to grow as a human being, you need to start that right now, immediately. I've heard from a lot of people that they are doing things, that they're growing, that they're taking classes. But when I look at what they're taking, they are doing things that are related to their professional careers. And that's important. But it's really important to grow yourself as a human being. So you need to do some personal growth kinds of things. So do that.
Can I just, I'm sorry for interrupting, but can you give me an example of what you mean by that? Because much of my time, my extra time is focused on professional growth, right? Because I'm growing my business. So when you say personal growth, what kinds of activities are you suggesting, or would be an example?
To learn about communication.
Okay.
To spend some time thinking about who you are as a human being. To learn a new hobby. All of those kinds of things that are not necessarily related to what we do professionally, although many of them can be, but to continue to learn a new language. All of those individual personal kinds of growth things people need to do all the time.
Okay. So maybe, I mean, like, so maybe we just throw it out there, like, pick something off your bucket list that you've always wanted to do, right? That kind of an idea. Something that you say, oh, I haven't had time for it, or that deployment didn't allow me, or I couldn't get that done. And pick one thing off your bucket list. That would be your number 1. Okay. What's your number 2? Yes.
So just as we tell, we at the Leader Transition Institute, we preach that service members need to plan for their transition early. We say 2 years out, 3 years out if they can. Well, if you're the spouse, you need to be a year ahead of your service member. Because one of the things that I have experienced personally and watched with other people is that oftentimes our spouses are so wrapped up in what they're doing every day in the military that they really don't have time to think about the transition things. And so if you are ahead of the game, you can be their coach and you can help to guide your family through the transition, but you need to have started ahead of time.
That's really interesting. And that's where I think my husband and I failed a little bit, right? I mean, I started the process with him and it was 100% focused on what he had to do because he was the service member. And that's where I think we really fell apart, is that I didn't stop and consider what I needed to get done in order to feel really good about moving out of the active duty world. So, okay, great one.
And I will say, that transition is a team sport. And so the spouse needs to participate, and the children too. If you have children in your family, they need to be a part of transition because their lives are likely going to change in some respects as well.
How would you recommend adding children into the transition process?
Talk to them about what they would be excited about when their service member parent is no longer on active duty. If you aren't necessarily going to stay, if you're not committed to staying in the area that you're retiring in, ask them where in the world they'd like to live. Get them involved in that process.
just so they understand what's coming down the road eventually.
Mhm.
I mean, because like you were saying, it takes a really long time for us to accept change just as human beings. It's ingrained in our personalities. And so I'm assuming it's no different for an 11-year-old or a 6-year-old to go through that process as it would an adult human being, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And the one thing that I will tell you is that our children, regardless of age, and you know this as a homeschool mom, you know this, but as a parent, you also know this. Our children are sponges, and they
Yeah.
pick up on our attitudes. And when they see that we are prepared, then they are more able to deal with change and to roll with the punches. When they see that we're crumbling, they're thinking, oh, what's going to happen to me now?
Right. When mom or dad falls apart, the world is ending. That stability is gone. I can totally see that. Yes. All right. So, Annie, what would you say is your number 3 main point, I guess, or takeaway?
I will say the old expression, birds of a feather flock together. So if you stay in or move to another military community, get involved in that community. You tried to find the retired spouses. I'm going to encourage you to keep trying to find the retired spouses in your community. If you are moving to a new community, reach out in that community and find out where the retired spouses are, because they can help to coach and guide you through the new role. They know the secrets of where is the best place to shop if it's not the commissary. When all they know, they just know all of that, and support them because over time they have, our older spouses have really given a lot. So I think it's really important to do that. But then also jump right into your civilian community. If you have been more engaged in the military community in the past than in the civilian community, take that extra time that you have and get engaged in the civilian community. We bring a lot to our communities, and so to just jump in there, you'll learn the movers and shakers in the different organizations that you're a part of, and make a positive difference in the civilian community.
Absolutely. Annie, those are 3 fabulous takeaways. So, just in case you missed them, number 1 is start a year before your service member is going to start in getting ready for transition and the retirement process. So, start early. Like, don't wait till the last minute. Number 2, and I'm doing this for myself, right? But number 2 is that, oh no, I did it wrong. Number 1 was make sure you're growing as a human being. Pick something off your bucket list and do it. Number 2 is to support your service member the best and your family the best. Start even earlier than they would to prepare for transition. And then the third one was get to know your community, get involved with your community, find your new home, I guess. Find your new people.
Yeah.
That are going to be there for you and help you through the process. I love that. That's fantastic. All right. So everyone that's listening, Annie, this has been a fantastic conversation. I feel like I've learned so much in terms of first how I could have done it better, but also I think that this is really valuable for military spouses that are just starting to go through this process, and maybe for those that have already passed through it to recognize things that they can still do now, because you're still eligible, you're still a military spouse, you still have this opportunity to grow as a human and continue to find your community and to support your service member spouse in a new way, right?
Mm-hmm.
So can you tell everyone, I'm going to share my screen again, and we're going to let them know where they can find you. So if they want to reach out and talk with Annie, this is how you're going to be able to do it. Can you tell them where they can find you?
So you can go to our website. It's on the slide there, www.leadertransitioninstitute.org. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. We are on Facebook. We're on Instagram. We are on Twitter. And I am on those platforms every day. If you send us a message or a comment, you're probably most likely going to hear back from me directly. And I look forward to hearing you. I love to talk with the people that are in our community.
I love that. All right. So before we go, I'm just going to throw this up there. Selena says, we're a year out. I need to get on it. Glad for your topic and getting to know Annie and what she provides for the military community. So lots
Looking
of big
forward to getting
kudos
to know
here.
you. Yeah.
Yeah, and I threw up a couple other ones, but just really quick, we've got Jennifer Pasquale that says, what you've highlighted is so important, how unique the experience can be for each spouse, service member, marriage, and family. So I love this. And Kendra Burns is talking about how she's not wrapping herself up in a military identity. And this is one of those things that we were talking about, right? Every spouse is going to have a different experience. So I love that we were able to have this conversation. Super excited about it. And if you have any questions, here's your takeaways as far as like your action items of what we would love for you to do with what we just did. First of all, connect with Annie on LinkedIn. Um, Go and visit the Leader Transition Institute website and check out those 3 classes and register for one of them. If you are in that time frame where you feel like it's going to be of value to you or your spouse, get registered for them. And then start the process of investing in you. I would love to hear, personally, I would love to hear what it is on your bucket list that you're going to jump into, because that's a favorite thing of mine, right? Like travel is on everything on my bucket list. Pretty much has to do with travel. So I'm going to pick one and I'm going to work towards it, which is great.
Awesome.
So there you have it. This is our very first inaugural SpouseLink live stream. Yay! Helping military spouses who are nearing retirement, in the middle of transition, or who have already gone through it, but find themselves still needing more or needing to understand more from their military communities. So support, inform, and inspire. That is the SpouseLink tagline. And they're connecting military spouses to the information that matters to them most. So go and visit spouselink.org today. Connect with me, Anna Larson, here on LinkedIn. I would love to connect with you as well. Or find me on Facebook if you want, or go to SpouseLink and connect with on Facebook with SpouseLink, and you can find me through there. Thank you again, Annie, for sharing your wisdom with us today, for connecting with me on LinkedIn. And like I said, you're going to see me in one of your changing focus classes
Awesome.
in the next few months. And thank you for everyone for watching today. We really appreciate it. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we will talk to you again in about 2 weeks with our next SpouseLink live stream.
Awesome.
Have a great day.
Thank you.